Hey there, my name is Jo and I am a watercolor artist, and when I first started painting I was gifted this watercolor set and I wanted to create a palette out of it so that it was more compact, a lot less messy, and I could organize the colors the way I wanted to. So what I did is I created this watercolor palette that I take everywhere. I've traveled so many miles with this thing and it's so compact. And I mean, just look at all of those colors. And a lot of these colors weren't even in this. Like, I've customized it since I started doing this. So I recently bought some new watercolor tube paints that they're not even in here yet. So I want to take you along to show you that process in case you want to make your own palette. So I'm really excited to share this because I love this so dearly, and I don't think I would be painting every day if it wasn't for the convenience of this. So if that's something you're interested in, please keep watching. So the first item you will need is a container to hold your watercolors. So I got this off of Etsy. It is the perfect height for my watercolor pans, and it's nice and compact for when I travel, but it holds enough color to where I have a full range during my initial stages of my painting. If you don't want to buy a new tin, you can also take something like an old Altoids tin and then put your watercolors in there. This is just old storage of watercolor pans that I don't currently use, and it's perfect though because the magnets still stick to it. So make sure you get a tin that is not aluminum and not a type of metal that magnets don't stick to. So the next item you're gonna need are watercolor tube paints. I got this as a Christmas gift last year, and it was perfect for giving me a wide range of colors to start with because I was still very new to watercolors. And you can tell that I use a lot of these bluer colors, a lot of the cooler colors, and I've since replaced those with higher quality watercolor tubes that I buy individually. So if you don't know what your palette is gonna look like, or you want a wide variety of color, you really like expressing yourself through the rainbow or something like that, starting with a watercolor set is a great way to go. So now that I'm replacing the watercolor tubes in the kit that someone bought me, I am expanding the colors that I have that weren't in the kit to begin with. And so I'm buying these individual tubes, which is what we're going to fill up today. And some of them are replacing the colors that I have run out of, and something like this indigo is something I've never used before, but it seems to match my palette, and so I am buying these colors as I see fit. If I want to see if it works with my style and if it works with the palette that I already have established for myself. So this is a great way to experiment if you want to try some more interesting colors that might not be in a watercolor rainbow kit that I just showed you before. So here are some of the colors, and then I will also be filling up with these. The next item you will need is really simple, is just a couple of toothpicks. You want enough to where you don't dip one side into multiple colors because you want to keep it clean and you don't want to mix colors. So the next item you will need are these empty full pans. I bought this in bulk off of Amazon. I believe the bag came with 60 pieces, so as I get new colors, I can just pick out an empty full pan and then fill that up and have that new color. And as my watercolors run out, I can just refill those pans. So I only really need this when I have a new color or I'm creating a separate palette for a separate reason with the same color. Another option is to purchase these half pans. I like the full pans because with my larger brushes, the bristles will bend if I try to pick up pigment in the half pan, so I go with the full pan. You can really choose whichever one you want. The next item you will need is something you've probably never seen before, but this is magnetic tape. It works just like Scotch tape. You can stretch it and then take off little pieces of magnets, and it's bendable and you can stick it to any surface. So this is what we're gonna put on the bottom of the full pans today. That way it sticks to the container that you put your paints in and it doesn't sort of shake around when you move it. I really like that I can flip my palette upside down and nothing falls out, and it's thanks to this. And even though the last item was tape, sometimes it's not sticky enough and the tape can fall off of the full pan or the half pan or whatever you're using. So I just add a little bit of super glue to the bottom just to make sure that magnet actually sticks. So this is what I have. I've noticed with other tube super glues, they dry out after one use, but with this, it's a nice little bottle and you can save it for later. I find that this works a lot better. So this is what we're going to be using, super glue. Be very careful with your fingers because this will stick to anything and everything. It's stuck to my desk and picked up the wood paint before. Just be careful with this. The next item you will need is a thin Sharpie or any marker that is permanent, because when you clean your watercolor palette, you want to make sure that the label doesn't wash off. So this is what I am using today. And then an optional item, but something that will clean up your palette quite nicely when you put the magnetic tape on it, are these scissors. Nothing fancy, just something to cut the edges of your pans. And as with all of these materials, if you're younger especially, make sure you are very, very careful or have parental supervision as you are creating this watercolor palette. So just use your common sense. Be safe, don't run around with scissors, don't put super glue in your sister's hair. Just use your common sense. The last item we will need today is a paper towel, because this process can get very messy. So the lighting has changed a little bit. I'm filming this at a different part of the day, and I just wanted to say that what you just watched is the material section, so that's all you need. And then the next part is going to be the instructions and how to put it all together. So I just wanted to intro that. So my very first step is to take those empty full pans and label them with the exact color that is on the associated tube of paint that I will put in that full pan. And I kept the full name because that makes it so much easier when these colors start to run out to refill them and not have to play a guessing game and potentially waste paint because you put the wrong color in the wrong pan. And something to note that you're not seeing right now is I put W and N on the other side of these to indicate that these are Winsor & Newton. There are many watercolor companies out there, and each of the colors might be slightly different when you go between companies. So like this indigo might be a little bit different than Daniel & Smith indigo, so those two paints would need separate full pans. So my next step is to cut this piece of magnetic tape into 6 equal size parts. My next step is to take this super glue and put a tiny little dot on each of these watercolor pans. If I was preparing more than 6 or 8 colors, I would probably do this step in batches, because when you put the dot of super glue on, it does dry pretty quickly and you have to act fast. So what I'm gonna do is just put a little dot on these. You can kind of spread it around just a tiny bit. You don't want to overdo this, to where the magnet will be sitting. So I'm just putting the little dots, and what I'm gonna do is I'm just going to gently place it, push down the corners. It does not have to be perfect. No one's really going to be looking at the bottom of your watercolor pans because they will be sitting in your palette and this part will not be visible. So you really just want a decent amount of magnet to stick to the bottom. That is the whole purpose of this. And there's that. So again, be very careful with your fingers. Touch just very lightly. to make sure that it's flat. We're gonna let this sit for maybe about a minute or two because the glue does need time to bond. And then after that, I will show you the next step. So now the glue has bonded and dried, and I do want to specify that when you put the magnet on the bottom, so this is tape, so one side is sticky, one side isn't. You can tell which side is sticky by which finger it sticks to. That sticky side is what you put on the pan. Even though you have the super glue is just making the sticky side stickier. So some of these watercolor pans have a little bit on the edge. So I am just gonna take my scissors and cut that off. And then that's what the bottom looks like. So now that these full pans are all set up, now is the fun part. So I'm going to take the tube paint. This is my first time seeing cobalt violet, and that is a very gorgeous color. So what I'm gonna do is I am just going to squeeze it in till the top. So the next color is going to be indigo. I will do that for each one of these. So this is where the paper towel comes in handy. This is a very, very messy process. So yeah. So use a paper towel as you need it, or just wash your hands completely. So now that we've set up each of the colors, the next thing we're going to do is go in and mix it with a clean toothpick. This color is quite interesting. I've never had this many bubbles come up. This one's gonna be kind of difficult. It's very runny. I might actually redo this color because I don't think it's gonna dry very well. But we're just gonna mix it up and see what happens. This is a good example of why we mix it up with a toothpick. It's because some of the ingredients can separate, like the water and the pigment. So something like this indigo, there are no air bubbles. It is very thick. This is how the watercolor paint usually comes out. And so I just kind of touch each of the corners with the paint. And I don't mix it up too vigorously because then that will add air bubbles. And so I kind of just tap it in there. And then wipe it off, wipe some of that pigment off. I just mixed this color with this end of the toothpick and then use the other end to mix the next color. That way you don't waste too many toothpicks. So here are the finished colors. I did a little swatch so that you guys could see what these look like on paper. So the very last step is to let these new watercolors dry. What I do is I store them in a cool, dry place away from the sun, and I usually just store them on the side of my desk where I'm not going to bump into them. Some take about 3 days to dry completely, some take 5 to 7 days, and once they dry, the amount of paint will go down so you can fill them up a second time and then mix with the toothpick and then do another round of drying, and then they should be good. You should have pigment pretty much to the top at that point. So this one is probably the closest to being out and will probably need to be refilled in a week or two. So what I do is I take this pan, run it under water for just a couple seconds. Doesn't have to be a lot, but it gets a lot of, like, if this purple got in here just a little bit, it kind of clears that out so that it's the pure color again. And then what I do is I just take that tube watercolor paint and then I put it in here to the top, mix it around with the toothpick, and let it dry, and then you are good to go. So that is how I prepare my watercolor set. And let me know if you have any additional questions. I would love to answer them. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a wonderful day.